Welcome back to the deep dive. This time, we're going to go deep into the Jacksonian era,
Yeah.
focusing on the presidency of Martin Van Buren.
Right.
We've got like a really interesting mix of sources today, a
Yeah.
historical podcast, some like dramatic retellings of key moments, and even glimpses into
yeah.
how everyday people coped with the wild economic swings of the time.
I love it.
Get ready for flower riots, presidential nicknames that really packed a punch,
Yeah.
and a Supreme Court case that feels like shockingly relevant,
Well, see-
really, even today.
It's amazing
Mhm.
how these sources bring history to life.
Right.
You know, going beyond just names and dates
Yeah.
to show us the human drama of this period.
Yeah, that's wild.
We'll see how Andrew Jackson's legacy, both the good and the bad,
Yeah.
shaped Van Buren's presidency.
Right.
And how even a little magician couldn't escape the forces at play
Right.
in those turbulent times.
You know, we often picture the 1830s as this era of like booming growth for America.
Oh.
Canals, industry, westward expansion.
Yeah.
But the sources paint a picture of serious economic instability too, right?
Absolutely.
Like a widening gap between the rich and the poor.
It's like a textbook example of progress
Oh, yeah.
that doesn't benefit everyone.
Right?
And it created this undercurrent of tension
Mhm.
that really defined
Yeah.
Van Buren's time in office.
It's crazy.
Take the flower riots of 1837 in New York City.
Okay.
Imagine being that warehouse clerk caught in the middle of that chaos.
Oh, my God.
A crowd of 5,000 people demanding flour at a fair price,
Wow.
fueled by rumors of hoarding and these crazy high prices.
It sounds terrifying.
Well, yeah,
What happened when the owner wouldn't give in to their demands?
they looted the place.
Oh, my God.
Hundreds of barrels of flour just gone.
Wow.
And what's really interesting
Yeah.
is how these sources reveal the simmering tensions
Mm.
just beneath the surface.
Right.
For example,
Yeah.
we have this account of a town hall meeting where an unidentified speaker directly accuses Eli Hart,
Mm-hmm.
the merchant,
Right.
of hoarding flour.
Wow.
He's playing on people's fear and anger, whipping up the crowd.
Yeah, it's so easy to see how that kind of rhetoric could take hold,
Right.
especially when people are struggling. I mean, the penny press might not have always been the most reliable source of information,
Yeah.
but those sensational headlines definitely tapped into this feeling
Oh, totally.
that things were unfair,
Yeah.
this kind of economic anxiety, plus the whole legacy of Andrew Jackson's policies.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot for Van Buren to inherit.
Right. Jackson's influence looms large here.
Yeah.
Remember, Van Buren was practically handpicked by Jackson
Oh, yeah.
as his successor.
Right.
He even promised to continue many of Jackson's policies,
Mhm.
which is why some called his presidency
Right.
Jackson's third term.
Oh, right. And he was also known as the Little Magician, right?
Yes.
For his political skills.
Mhm.
I guess those two nicknames kind of sum up.
Yeah. The two sides of Van Buren. Exactly. On one hand, he's this shrewd political operator.
Right.
On the other, he's tied to all the baggage
Mhm.
that came with Jackson's often controversial legacy.
And one big piece of that legacy was the Specie Circular.
Yeah.
The idea was to curb land speculation,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems like it backfires spectacularly.
Tried it.
Can you remind us what that was all about and
Swear.
why it caused so many problems?
Jackson's thinking was that requiring land purchases to be made in gold or silver
Okay.
would prevent risky lending and keep prices from getting too inflated.
Oh, okay, I see.
But it had all these unintended consequences.
Right.
Western banks, in particular, were hit hard.
Oh, wow.
They had to call in their loans from the East to meet the demand for specie,
Mm-hmm.
leaving everyone in a really vulnerable position.
Right.
What's fascinating
Yeah.
is that even some members of Jackson's own cabinet had concerns about this policy.
Why would they object? It was Jackson's idea.
Well, it turns out some of them had personal stakes in the land business.
Oh, interesting.
So you can see how intertwined economics and politics were at that time.
Right.
And unfortunately for Van Buren,
Yeah.
he was the one who ended up inheriting this economic time bomb.
And then it explodes into the Panic of 1837.
Right.
We hear about economic downturns all the time, but the way the sources describe the Van Ruin era,
Mhm.
it's really chilling.
Oh, yeah.
Banks are failing, people are losing their homes and jobs.
Right.
The story of that New York merchant who loses everything
That's awful.
just drives home the real human cost of this crisis.
It's a stark reminder that these economic events
Right.
aren't just abstract numbers on a page.
Yeah.
They represent real people's lives being upended.
Totally.
Imagine
Yeah.
you're that merchant on Wall Street.
Hmm.
You see the panic in people's eyes,
Oh,
the
God.
bank doors closing,
Yeah.
and you realize everything you've worked for is gone.
Wow.
It's heartbreaking.
It really makes you wonder how much of this Van Buren could have controlled.
It's tough.
He was trying to stay true to Jackson's vision, but maybe that wasn't the right move in the long run.
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
It's easy to look back and judge.
Right.
But remember, Van Buren was dealing with an economic crisis he didn't create
Right.
on top of the immense pressure of
Yeah.
following a giant figure like Andrew Jackson.
So we've got economic turmoil, Jackson's shadow hanging over everything, and then there's the human tragedy of the Trail of Tears.
Right.
Even though the sources we have don't go into a ton of detail,
Yeah.
it's important to acknowledge the devastating consequences of the Indian Removal Act,
Absolutely.
especially for the Cherokee Nation.
The story of Private John J. Burnett, who witnessed the forced removal firsthand,
Right.
is particularly powerful. He actually sympathized with the Cherokee
Wow.
and even risked his own safety to stand up for them.
Oh my gosh.
There's this one moment where a teamster is mistreating an elderly Cherokee man,
Oh, wow.
and Burnett steps in to stop it. Later, he gives his own heavy coat to a sick Cherokee woman.
That's incredible.
Right.
A small act of kindness in the face of this massive injustice.
Hmm.
But in the end, he's just one man.
Yeah.
And he's still bound by his orders.
Right.
It really highlights the impossible moral dilemmas people face during that time.
And those dilemmas played out on a national stage
Right.
with huge consequences,
Yeah.
just like the Amistad case, which we'll talk about next.
Oh, okay.
This is where Van Buren's presidency takes a really dramatic turn.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Van Buren dealing with this economic mess. Jackson's legacy still looming large and the moral complexities of the Amistad case. But now we need to talk about Texas. It sounds like annexation really played a role in Van Buren's eventual downfall, which I have to admit I didn't fully realize before diving into these sources. Can you set the stage for us? What was the political climate like heading into the 1840 election?
Well, the 1840 election was really a judgment on Van Buren, and by extension on Jacksonian democracy as a whole. Remember, Van Buren had tied himself to Jackson pretty closely, for better or worse. And with the economy still in rough shape, people were looking for a change.
Which is where William Henry Harrison comes in, right?
Hmm.
The war hero, Old Tippecanoe. He had lost to Van Buren back in 1836, but maybe this time things would be different.
Things were definitely different this time around. The Whigs, the opposition party, were united and ready to take power. They used Harrison's military fame to their advantage, painting Van Buren as Martin Van Ruin and blaming him for all the economic hardship.
Ouch, that's harsh. Nicknames can be so powerful in politics, but did Harrison actually have any concrete policies, or was it all just personality and image?
He did have policies, but the campaign was much more about tapping into people's emotions and frustrations than getting into the weeds of policy details. The Whigs were really smart about channeling the public's anger over the economy, turning Harrison into this symbol of hope and a fresh start.
And it worked. Harrison wins in a landslide. But then he dies just 31 days into his presidency. What happened there?
The story goes that he gave this really long inaugural address out in the cold and rain, caught pneumonia, and never recovered. It's such a bizarre twist of fate, and it meant that his vice president, John Tyler, suddenly became president.
Yeah, his accidency, as some called him, didn't seem like he was very popular.
He wasn't. Tyler was kind of a lone wolf, even within his own Whig party. He disagreed with them on some key issues, especially when it came to banking. And he really wanted to make his own mark on history, to be more than just a footnote as Harrison's replacement.
Which is where Texas enters the picture. He saw annexing Texas as his ticket to a second term.
Exactly. Tyler was convinced that annexing Texas would be a popular move, and he was willing to take some pretty big risks to get it done.
Like, what kind of risks? What did he do?
Well, he started secretly negotiating a treaty with Texas, even promising them military protection from Mexico before the treaty was even officially approved.
Wait, he didn't even have the authority to do that, did he?
Nope, he really didn't. But Tyler was determined to push this through, even if it meant bending the rules. He probably thought he could keep it all under wraps. But then,
The treaty leaks along with Tyler's secret promise of military support. What a mess. How did people react?
people were outraged, especially those who saw annexation as a way to expand slavery. Henry Clay, the Whig leader, came out strongly against the treaty, warning that it could lead to war with Mexico.
And what about Van Buren? Was he still involved in all of this at this point?
He was, and he also opposed annexation, arguing that it would be harmful to the nation. He was trying to position himself for a comeback in the 1844 election, but his stance on Texas alienated a lot of Southern Democrats.
Because they saw it as a threat to their interests, which really meant protecting the institution of slavery.
Exactly. And this is where it gets even more interesting. Even Andrew Jackson, Van Buren's old mentor, turned against him on this issue. Jackson, even though he was quite ill at this point, was a strong supporter of annexation and threw his weight behind a new candidate, James K. Polk. Polk was a younger Democrat, sometimes called Young Hickory.
So now Van Buren has lost the support of his own party, his mentor, and a good chunk of voters not looking good for his chances.
It wasn't. The 1844 election became a showdown between Polk, the expansionist Democrat, and Henry Clay, the Whig, who was against annexation. Tyler, realizing he had no chance of winning, actually cut a deal with the Democrats.
He dropped out of the race in exchange for their support in annexing Texas. That's pretty strategic.
It was a pragmatic move, for sure, and it cleared the path for Polk's victory. Polk campaigned on this platform of manifest destiny, promising to expand America's territory, and he won pretty decisively.
So in the end, Tyler got his Texas annexation, even though it wasn't him who benefited politically, and Polk gets the presidency, carrying on that Jacksonian torch in a way that Van Buren just couldn't. It's amazing to think that what started with wanting to curb land speculation could lead to something like the annexation of Texas.
It really shows how individual ambition and political maneuvering can have these unintended consequences, shaping the course of history in ways that no one could have predicted. It makes you wonder what would have happened if Van Buren had actually supported annexation. Could he have won re-election?
That's a great question. We'll never know for sure, but it definitely makes you think about the choices leaders make and how they ripple through time. It's incredible how these, seemingly isolated events, the economic crisis, the Amistad case, the annexation of Texas, are all connected in a way. It's like watching a domino effect unfold.
It really is.
Yeah.
And as we shift our focus to the annexation of Texas,
Right.
it's impossible to ignore the looming specter of the Civil War.
Yeah.
How did these events, some seemingly unrelated,
Right.
contribute to that larger conflict?
That's the question that's been on my mind this whole deep dive. It's like each event built upon the last, increasing tensions and setting the stage for this massive national crisis.
You're right. Tyler's obsession with annexing Texas wasn't simply about his own ambition, or even manifest destiny, as Polk later framed it.
Right.
It was deeply intertwined with the expansion of slavery.
Right.
And Calhoun's letter really brought that to the forefront.
He really forced the nation to confront the issue head on.
Yeah.
No more pretending it was just about land or economics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why Van Buren's opposition to annexation was such a problem for Southern Democrats.
Right.
They saw it as a betrayal, a sign that he wouldn't protect their interests,
Right.
which in their minds meant protecting the institution of slavery.
So Van Buren's downfall reflects the larger divisions that were tearing the nation apart. North versus South,
Yeah,
abolitionists versus slaveholders.
precisely. And Polk's victory in 1844, fueled by the annexation issue, really cemented the power of pro-expansion, pro-slavery forces within the Democratic Party.
Right.
It's no coincidence that the annexation of Texas led directly to the Mexican-American War.
Oh, right. Which has led to even more territory for the United States, reigniting the fight over whether slavery should be permitted in those new lands. I mean, the Compromise of 1850 attempted to settle things, but...
But the fundamental tensions were just too strong.
Right.
The Fugitive Slave Act, Bleeding Kansas, the Dred Scott decision.
Yeah.
These events just fueled the fire on both sides, pushing the nation closer and closer to the brink of war.
It's really sobering to see how the seeds of the Civil War were sown decades earlier.
Yeah.
During this period of seemingly disconnected events.
Right.
But as we've learned,
Yeah.
these events were anything but disconnected.
Totally.
They were all part of this complex web of economic, political, and social forces that ultimately resulted in the nation's greatest crisis.
It makes you think about all the what-ifs, doesn't it?
Totally.
What if Tyler hadn't been so focused on Texas annexation?
Right.
What if Van Buren had taken a different approach to the issue?
Yeah.
Could these different choices have actually altered the course of history?
That's what's so fascinating about studying history.
I know.
It's full of these intriguing possibilities, but it also reminds us that even decisions that might seem small at the time
Right.
can have enormous, long-lasting consequences.
Absolutely.
The individuals we've discussed, Van Buren, Jackson, Tyler, Calhoun, Adams, they all played a part, big or small, in shaping the nation's destiny.
And it underscores that history isn't just a dry collection of dates and names.
Right.
It's about people, their choices,
Mm-hmm.
and the enduring impact of ideas.
Yeah.
It's a story that continues to resonate today as we face our own complex challenges
Right.
and work toward a more just and equitable world.
So as we resurface from this deep dive into the past,
Yeah.
we're left with some thought-provoking questions.
Mm-hmm.
What other connections can you make between the Jacksonian era and the events that followed?
Mm.
How do the lessons we've uncovered from this turbulent period inform our understanding of the present?
That's a great question.
We leave you to ponder these questions as you continue your own exploration of history.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.